All right, welcome everyone. I'm Councilmember Zach Hall, and I'm calling the October 7th, 2025 City Council Planning, Development, and Environment Committee meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. I'm joined by Council President Walsh and Councilmember Jang. Really quickly to run through the agenda, we've got public comment at the top. We're going to approve our minutes from our previous meeting. We have COM 0173 Fire Code Permit Fee Increase in EF&R Budget, and COM 0177, the 2025 Comprehensive Plan Amendments and Rezone. And then we'll do announcements. So the first item on our agenda is public comment, and I'll just check in with our clerk. I don't see any members of the public who would want to comment in the room with us. Is there anyone online?
No, Chair.
No one online. All right, well, I'll just remind folks that we have public comment opportunities throughout the agenda tonight after the council question and answer period for each agenda item. So we'll come back to that in case anyone has joined us. With that, we'll move on to our next item, which is approval of the September 9th, 2025 meeting minutes, which were distributed in advance. Any corrections by the committee? All right, hearing none, the September 9th, 2025 meeting minutes are approved as presented by unanimous consent. The next item on our agenda is COM 0173 Fire Code Permit Fee Increase in Eastside Fire and Rescue Budget, presented by, and I believe, James Gray instead of Director Dollywall is here with us today, our building official, and Jeremy Hicks, the fire marshal from Eastside Fire and Rescue. So feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much, Chair Hall. And I'm going to just open up today and just start the presentation, then turn it over to Chief Aho. Again, so we are here tonight to talk about fire permit fees, and with that, we've got a couple of things. Council Member Jang sent a question forward, and so we had a correction that we sent forward on one of the tables. Percentage was calculated incorrectly. Thank you for spotting that, and we sent the correction forward to you. We can chat about that at when that point in the presentation comes up if you'd like to further. And with that, I will turn it over to Chief Aho.
Well, good evening. Will Aho, Assistant Chief with Eastside Fire. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you tonight on the permit fees. Following my portion of it, we'll have Fire Marshal Hicks that will also come up and get into more of the nitty-gritty and the detail associated with it. So ultimately what we're end up looking for is some direction from this committee. As far as recommending the fire permit fees that are shown in it, and then have a conversation related to the pass-through of the fire permit fees directly to Eastside Fire. So a little bit of Eastside's background. Just as a reminder, we are a governmental nonprofit organization, which means that we have no ability to directly levy any kind of taxes. So the bulk of our revenue sources come from our contributions from our partner agencies and any contracts for services that we have out there. So Eastside is again made up underneath an interlocal agreement, which is a partnership of 5 core partners, which is 3 cities, City of Sammamish, Issaquah, and City of North Bend, and then 2 fire districts, Fire District 10, Fire District 38. Leveraging our regionalization and our partnerships, we also maintain 4 contracts for service, one with the City of Mercer Island for fire and EMS, Woodinville Fire and Rescue, which encompasses Fire District 38 and the city limits of Woodinville, and then King County Fire District 45. So those are all contract agencies. And it'll be important as we get into it a little bit more when we talk a little bit more about the funding side of it. So when we worked on our 25-26 budget process, our Fire Marshal's office was looking at a couple different ways that we can better support the growth that is going on within our cities in particular. So when we look at how, just taking a step back and take a look at how we are funded, it is a formula that shares the cost among each of the 5 partner agencies. Now the contracts, they pay 100% of their own costs associated with it. So within Eastside, the growth that occurs within the cities is also paid for by all the partners, meaning that Fire District 10 and Fire District 38, they also pay their proportional share, but there is no legal obligation, no legality that we have any say what happens within the districts. That all falls under the purview of King County Fire Marshal's office, and Fire Marshal Hicks can get into that a little bit deeper. So when we looked at the growth within the cities, we wanted to come up with a plan to make sure that we are doing our diligence to support that growth. One of it was standardizing our fee structure across all of our East Side partners. Again, excluding the fire districts, because we have no say in what occurs within the fire districts. And also including our contract agencies outside of the Snoqualmie Tribe. Again, we don't have any legal authority within Snoqualmie tribal lands. So by standardizing those fees leads to good transparency for everybody that is looking to do development. It maintains that consistency, and it's predictable for any of the developers that are moving forward to develop within these areas. So part of the growth, we're looking at the growth projections within our cities. We had gone back and asked for the addition of a fire marshal to be paid for from our partners. So our current partner only pay for 3 fire marshals, 3 of the 6 within the fire marshal's division. So there was, as part of the conversation with that, we needed to look at some budget reductions because of the pressures that we're looking at for our cost increases. So because the cost increases exceeded what our partners were comfortable with, we lost that fire marshal ask, which would have been allowed us to better support the growth within the area. So we need to get creative as to how can we try to cover the costs, knowing that our job is to support the cities and the partners, which came to this cost pass-through approach from each of the partners, again, mainly focused on the cities. So the current staffing model we have, our fire marshal's office is total staffing of 6 people. 3 are paid for by the East Side partners. That is the same staffing level that we've had since 1999. 2 are provided from Woodinville Fire and Rescue. And just for context, Woodinville added, recognizing that there is growth that has occurred, and anybody that's been up in Woodinville has seen the amount of growth that has gone up there. They added the 2nd fire marshal in Woodinville in 2024, so that helps to support that. With the addition of Mercer Island, they are paying for 100% of the cost of, in this case, Fire Marshal Hicks. So again, the fire marshal team has got 6 people in there, and it's divided in half between the contract agencies and what Eastside is being able to provide. Now, everybody is able to receive the benefit of having that team of 6. So there is some workload sharing that does occur on that one. What our concern is that being able to keep up with, having a sustainable model to keep up with the growth that is occurring within each of these divisions or within the cities. We pride ourselves in being able to help support our communities by high level of customer service to each of the builders and developers that are coming before us. So that is a brief look as to how we are structured, how we're funded, and what our staffing levels look like. Any questions for me right now? Okay. I will turn this over to Fire Marshal Hicks. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Evening, Council. I'm going to take us through a little ride here, and we're going to talk about fire permit fees and do a little compare and contrast, and then discuss how we kind of got to the point where we're at right now. One of the things that we'll talk a little bit about is total cost compensation, and then analytics that we use to determine the work that needs to be done compared to what it costs. When we started looking at these different matrix of how this could move forward, we wanted to bring an approach to it that, when we explain it, makes sense. So hopefully at the very end of this, you'll go, awesome job, Jeremy. And it will make sense. If not, please ask questions. I got a couple slides here. You stop me whenever you want, or when we're done, we could answer questions, your choice. Looking at the fire permit challenges, we came up with problem statement in the objectives. So one of the big things was customer transparency. Eastside Fire provides services to 7 different city jurisdictions, and one of the things that came up was the fee levels were different in all the different cities. Doesn't mean the amount of work's different on different cities, it just means the fee schedules weren't aligned. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we had the customer transparency by aligning these, standardizing these across the contract cities. Number 1, the naming convention for the permits, and then the fees for the permits. So when a contractor comes into Issaquah, they're seeing the same permit types that are in Woodinville, that are in Mercer Island, that are in Carnation, Duval, all those different areas, because the contractors don't just work in Issaquah, or they don't just work in Mercer Island. We also went for 100% cost recovery. A lot of jurisdictions have adopted kind of that recovery method of the work that needs to be done. What does it cost? What we did a good job with is analyzing what it costs the person to do the job, and using our analytics that we collect. We do 2,164 permit reviews last year. We did somewhere around 1,600 fire inspections. So we have a lot of analytics that we can look at to determine how much time it takes to do these different tasks. And then, the new laws and regulations. I received a question earlier today. Thanks for the question. Like, what is more complex about these laws? And I want to break that down into 2 different categories. One is legislative mandates, and the second is systems. So legislation mandates, we've seen a couple of them recently. Middle housing's one that, we're talking about internally with your building staff team and your planning team on how we're going to recognize those different things in the fire code. And then on the fire systems, they're just getting more complex. Technology is evolving. They need to be integrated. Fire alarm systems need to be integrated with HVAC systems. They need to be integrated with elevators, and the same with fire sprinkler systems. These systems are just becoming more complex, and as the different code and technology changes, we have to keep up with that. Now, that's not to say that everything's going to get harder moving down the road. I mean, things will get easier too, and we anticipate that as new technology comes out, that plan review and inspections may change times, and that's the number one reason we're using these analytics now. So next year when we come, we can say, well, hey, the review time for this project went down. Let's look at that review fee and figure that out, or inspection fee, and we'll be able to produce that data almost instantaneously. So right here is one of my examples. This shows all the different jurisdictions that we serve. And essentially this is comparing a residential fire sprinkler system. We call it a 13D system. It's the basic fire sprinkler system that you would put inside a residence that requires it. Issaquah does not have a sprinkler ordinance, so these are not required in all residences. However, they are used to mitigate fire deficiencies, whether it's fire flow, hydrant location, access, grade, some of those things. If they don't have that, then the mitigation would be installing a sprinkler system or building a bigger road or installing a hydrant, which is extremely cost prohibitive for a single family residence. So this is very commonly used nationwide as a mitigation. That's why I selected it here. At the top, you can see that Issaquah currently, and there's a range there. The current permit's $381 to $544, and it depends on the number of heads. You'll see in our new algorithm, we took the number of heads out. The number of heads, the number that stick out of your ceiling, don't take any longer to review than a simple system. So we tried to simplify that and then provide a cost for that. The new cost for that would be $728. As you can see lower on the screen, Sammamish is the next city we're currently working with. All the other cities have taken that fee schedule and adopted the fee schedule, and they're aligned now. So we're really big into the data-driven analysis on this. Historically, fire permits, or I would say probably any permit in jurisdictions, were assessed and assigned a value. How that value was assigned, I wasn't here back in the day when the first value was assigned for any of our cities. So what we wanted to do is make sure that when, as I told you earlier, when we explain this, we want to be able to say, well, here's the reason why that fee's the fee. So we looked at the time on task. So we took all the permits that we have and we looked at how long it takes us to do them on an average. Then we developed time estimates for the ones that we don't have a lot of analytics on, or ones that we have a lot of analytics and we want to round the edges off so they're not, up and down jagged. Then we also wanted to provide permit variability. So right now, sometimes there's just a permit, and if somebody wants to put in a permit, and I'll use portable or power generators, not something we see a lot of anymore. But occasionally you get a homeowner that wants to put in a power generator. The code requires a permit for it. So we wanted to make sure that we put that into our system so there's a spot for it to go in versus, well, I don't know where this goes. We'll just, do an hourly fee or something. So we put that stuff in there. So the permits line up with the fire code and the required permits that are out there. We also looked at the total cost compensation. So not only the time it takes to do it, but what's that time equate to the number of hours that we're spending on, both for plan review and inspections. And this allows us to make annual adjustments. So the queue that you guys have in your packet there shows all our permit categories and the fees, what they are now, what we're proposing. But we have that same document that shows how many hours it takes. So when we go in there next year at a permit fee review, we could take our analytics, put it into the computer, right, the Excel document, and that could change all the information, so we'll have it right away versus going, historically it was a cost of living increase that was attached to it, and as you can only imagine, a cost of living covers one factor of the whole total cost compensation of what it takes to do the work. So, and then we use regional benchmarking, so we could quickly look at a permit that is out there for any of our service areas and compare it to another service area and go, okay, we're in line, and we are in line. We're actually below where other cities are right now in our permit costs. And we're doing that, some would say, well, why don't you make your permits comparable with other cities? Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. We could go, this is the time it takes us to do the work. This is what it takes to finish the job. Here's what the permit fee should be. And I'm very happy where we are with the permit fees. So I'm going to show you 3 different slides here. This worked well with our other cities, and just a comparison of kind of where we're at and where we want to go. This first slide's a little busy, so I'm going to explain it. At the top, this is a single family residence with a sprinkler system. Roughly 3,000 square feet, roughly 40 heads. Why I had to put those metrics in there is because that's what the fee schedule shows right now, so I had to put that metric in there to show you what it will be. Below are the review fee and the sprinkler system fee. Below that is the city building plan review fee and the city building permit fee. Those are two fees that would be paid by the contract, or the homeowner, or the contractor, or the developer to get a city building permit. And why that's important is because we'll talk about a percentage of those. And then down below, I just gave a definition. So the fire plan review fee deals with the structure, the house, the residence. When we review that house, we look at where it's sitting on the property, what the access is, where the fire hydrants are, what the distance from the fire hydrants is, what the fire flow of the hydrants. We have a lot of information that we look at to make sure that they'll comply with the code when they put in the building permit. And then the fire sprinkler permit is basically a system permit. Fire alarm systems, fire sprinklers, smoke control, hood suppression systems, HVAC, duct detectors. Those are all systems that are on the fee permit schedule right now. The generator would be an example of that. So up above currently, a fire plan review fee for any residence is $210. The fire sprinkler permit is $544, which brings you a total of $754. The proposed fee would be $864 for the building review fee. And that's basically 15% of the building plan review fee. So we're comparing apples to apples. The city uses the building plan review fee. We want to use that and do a percentage of that. Those numbers that you see below are based off of a adopted matrix, and they all go off valuation. So the city permit fee would be a representation of 100%. In your fee schedule for the city building plan review is 65% of the permit fee. That's how it comes out. Then of that 65%, the fire review fee would be 15%. We use that number because the average amount of time it takes, we start to compare it to the amount of work. Obviously, when building does a plan review, they're looking at plumbing, mechanical, all sorts of things. We're taking a small component of that, and it's 15%. That's what we think is a fair number, and that's also being used regionally for that number, that 15%. So that's where that number comes from. And then if you start to compare it to hours that we do the work, divided by the hourly rate, it comes out good. And this transfers to commercial projects, townhomes, all the way across the board, because again, this goes off valuation. The less value of the project, one would think the smaller project, the more valuation, the more complex project. And I'll show you a couple slides to illustrate that. So the difference in this permit is simply the A minus B there would be $838 difference for a house. I believe this house that we pulled up was about $1.2 million valuation, roughly. And just for information, again, I mentioned that not all homes require sprinkler systems. So we use the valuation and we added a sprinkler house to a fictitious house here to show you, because the system permit is static. It's a static price. Moving on to a townhome unit. This one has about a $2.4 million valuation, if I remember right. And I picked some of these not to show so much the difference, but like this is what would go into a house or a building that would require the system. So depending on the townhomes or how many units there are, there's a bunch of code that automatically requires sprinkler systems, and then if they have deficiencies, then they have to install the sprinkler systems. I use that kind of analogy here so I can show you what a real case would look like. So this is a 4-unit townhome. This is a fire alarm system and a full sprinkler system would be installed. Currently, it would be about $2,738. This would increase to $4,146, so a difference of $1,400. Now, this is for 4 units too. This isn't per unit. So we've talked, I heard earlier we were talking about affordable housing and some other things to incentivize people to build. This is for the building itself. So it's not, if you had a 10 unit or a 12 unit or a 14 unit, this price would look roughly the same. Now the one variable in there would be the building or the fire plan review for the building, because it goes off the valuation of the building, but the systems would stay static. So it's not apartment A is gonna get this value, this system, and then apartment B is gonna get that system. We do the whole building in its entirety for this, which helps when people build these larger multi-family buildings. And you can see it's $4,100 total, and then below is what the building plan review and the permit fee are from the city currently. And then the last one is a commercial TI. It's a tenant improvement. This was a very large tenant improvement. That's why I picked this one. It took a lot of time to do this, and just the remodel of the building was about $2.9 million to remodel the building, and they had to include fire sprinkler systems and fire alarm systems because it was the use that they're going to be using the building for. I also picked this building because they had to put a fire underground system in, which is basically the pipe that goes from the conveyance system or the municipal system to the fire sprinkler system. Those are very labor intensive in review and inspections. It takes about 7 inspections to get those signed off, and it takes quite a few hours. They're specially restrained. They have to have thrust blocks. They have to be connected. You have to make sure all the water utilities are on site. You have to flush them. There's just a lot of work in them. Roughly, I would say, well, here we're accounting for 9 hours worth of work, and I would say it's all of 9 hours worth of work to do that out the door. Before we were getting $283 for that 9 hours of work. It was not in line with what the time on task was. The plan review fee, again, you saw earlier that a residential was like $236. Commercial was $273. It was one or the other. That's how we fit these into a box. This easily took 10 hours of building plan review time. And we understand that some buildings are going to be more, some are going to be less, and we're going to try to round out those corners a little bit. But this took a lot of time to do and a lot of working with the architect and the engineers on this. Fire sprinkler system needed to be installed in the fire alarm system. This would be what I would consider the worst case scenario. Someone would ask, well, Jeremy, why do you put the worst case scenario in there? It's transparency. This is what it's going to be if somebody does it. And there's no sense of trying to find the cheapest building to show you all, because you'll eventually see it. So this is exactly what it would be. There's about a $4,400 increase in here, and then mainly it's due to the underground system that goes in. I think we're going to see a lot more of these commercial TIs. Maybe not to this extreme, but you have a lot of buildings here that people are repurposing and doing other things. So if that happened and it was the worst case scenario, it would look like this. This also has a really high fire plan review fee on it. Again, I alluded to the fact that it definitely took more than 10 hours to do this, but if you look at that, it's roughly around 10 hours worth of work there. So, any questions on those 3 slides? Okay. Do you want to chat on this slide, James? This is just a comparison of the historical fire fees. Yeah. Full disclosure, this was provided by my partner in crime, James here. I want to make sure that this, if you have questions, we could definitely answer them. But this is just historical fire permit related fees collected starting back in 2020 to 2025. And that's every year you've looked at fire permit fees, and and there's a slide in here, but kind of goes up by a percentage. Usually a cost of living percentage is what's been proposed. Again, none of that was tied to time on task or the amount of hours it actually took to do the work. But these are how those fees are developed. You probably look at 2021, because I did the same thing, and I say, well, you had a lot of growth that year. You had the permits come in. And also know that when a builder applies for a permit and that money comes in, they may not be seeing inspections for 2 years or 3 years. I just did a permit inspection today, and we were talking about it, and it was a 2018 permit. So those takes a while to build some of these buildings. Next slide is essentially showing the difference of what was collected, proposed, and the difference. So in 2024, for just the fire review building permits, So that would be that $236 number, the $273 number. $19,198 was collected, and $43,813 was collected on the fire system side, or fire permit side. Using some numbers, some magic of getting all these permits, we went through last year's permits and we tied them to what the new value would be in an Excel document. That would go to $45,786 for the plan review. And that's basically using, taking the building review fees and doing 15% is how that number came out. And then the fire systems is the one that we compared on the list and went through and said, this is a 13D system, this is a fire alarm system, this is a smoke control system. And that would go to $25,983. That's the difference between those two. And James, at the bottom here, you put anticipated total annual fees after the increase. It would go to 110, 100 to 125 from 76,000. Is that?
Well, that number looks like it's pretty big, that 238% number. Well, that number looks pretty large, that 238% number. As the chief has pointed out, when his staff are working on these projects, like a $2.9 million tenant improvement, when he says 10 hours, 10 hours, that might even be conservative. They put a lot of time into it, and that was a $238 fee. So it was way, way out of the proportion of where it needed to be. And at 15% of the plan review, we agree, it much more accurately reflects their labor that they put into that, to put into that job.
So where we're at right now is here today, October 7th, speaking with y'all. We're hoping to move this forward to council reading and final adoption on November 10th. There's the questions that we brought up at the beginning of the PowerPoint presentation. Does the committee recommend increasing the fire permit fees as it's shown in Exhibit A in your packet? And does the committee recommend passing the proposed fire permit fees through the Eastside Fire and Rescue? With that, I'll answer any questions here.
Great, thank you for the presentation, both of you for the presentation. Go to committee, any questions? Yeah, Council President, go ahead.
I have like 6 or 7 questions, so bear with me.
Okay.
In this situation, you're proposing the fire plan review fees changing to a percentage rather than kind of the previous static amount. How does this compare to any other municipalities or fire services?
So it's actually an adopted practice. So in all our municipalities that this has been adopted, we've been using the 15%. And there's a couple of reasons why that 15% is used. Is one, fees are collected at permit submittal. So doing an hourly cost is hard to come back to, because then you do your review and then you have to go back and charge the applicant. And then just the philosophy that it makes sense, you know, that the review time that takes it's about 15% of what the building site would do. And if you run those numbers out on a project, those 3 examples are prime examples, which I didn't even do until after I put the slides in. They come out to the amount of hours that we would put into those. So, and also know that time covers like pre-application meetings, the numerous phone calls we get. Very rarely do you have somebody file a permit and never call the fire marshal's office. That just doesn't happen. As much as we try to get the information out and the design standards and all that, people still have questions, and we're definitely happy to answer them, because we want to start the stage with everything right, because nothing is as frustrating for everybody involved as when they get to the end and like, oh, by the way, you got to do this. So we put a lot of forward time into the front end of this.
Okay. You had mentioned something about not being able to standardize the fees within the fire districts and the Snoqualmie tribe. Why is that, and how can EF&R ensure that they are also paying appropriate fees?
So I'll take a stab at that. I'm not the King County Fire Marshal, but I've played in the county realm for a little bit. In the fire marshal's office, there's something called authority having jurisdiction. You guys have designated the EF&R as your authority having jurisdiction when it relates to fire code. So when we come forward to you and we provide code amendments or, the WUI code information or fire fees, we're doing that on behalf of the authority having jurisdiction to have you guys codify that within your municipal standards. In King County, we're not the authority having jurisdiction. The King County is the authority having jurisdiction. The King County Fire Marshal works for the county. So they develop their standards and their amendments and their fee schedules based on the greater unincorporated King County. So we do have input when it comes to some of the review stuff, or especially in our response areas. The fire marshal, we have a great working relationship, but we don't standardize their permit fees. It's not our lane to be in when it comes to how they set up their fees.
So then, is it the county fire marshal that is doing the work on those?
Yeah, we don't do,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
I got you. Yep.
Is that where you were going?
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do the work in the county agencies, outside of some minor consultant work on if they have a question about how we respond.
Yeah, okay. I believe there was something in there about like a 10% additional fee that gets kept by the city. And so I guess Director Dollywall, I might be calling you up for that one, but is that additional fee kept by the city, does that cover the costs that we have for coordinating the permits and working with EF&R?
Sure. For the record, Minnie Dollywall, Community Planning and Development Director. I don't think anyone in the community is here, but good evening. That's correct. The 10% is covering just the intake, the routing, the fee collection, the payment and issuance. There's a fair amount of work that the permit techs do to get it processed through the system, but it doesn't apply to building permits because we have to do that anyways. So the 15% that is going to apply to the building permit category, we're not applying additional 10% to that. So only to the sprinkler systems, the alarm system, the specialty fire permits that are only going to fire department for review, because the other work is going to occur anyways for the other ones. So
That's great.
hence, the anticipated revenue for those would probably be in the range of 4,000 to 5,000, because overall it may be 100K of new fees coming in, but only a portion of it is for the fire permits. The remainder is for the building permits that the 15% goes to fire review.
Okay. And I've got another city-related question. So as we've talked about permitting, one of our city goals is to streamline permitting and making sure that we're not creating any delays in that permitting process. And so I'd like to understand how the East Side Fire and Rescue portion is currently working, how we anticipate these fees allowing us to potentially streamline and speed things up in the future. Is that something you can talk on?
Sure, it's a partnership. So, we have a great working relationship with East Side Fire in terms of the plan review piece. If they are running behind, James calls them up and says, where are these? And so, they get right to it and get back to us, because sometimes things happen, vacations, time off, sick time, whatever that case may be. But now that we are monitoring our reports, we have a good sense of, we can run those by division, our engineers taking longer, how's the fire department, but ultimately, we don't control as the city, so some of these mandates from the state that require the cities to establish, are contingent on our partner agencies, whether it's East Side Fire and Rescue or Sam Platte Water and Sewer District, because we do route it to them. I think it's everyone working together, but in terms of having authority to approve for fire, we do not. So we do need the fire marshal to be timely with their review based to meet the state mandated timelines.
Okay, now back to is there then, how does this relate into the East Side Fire and Rescue budget and the ability to potentially hire that additional staff person for this area as we were talking about?
Can I phone a friend? Okay. Chief, you want to handle that?
Whichever one of you want to, there you go.
Yeah, great question. So the way this happened, way we're approaching this is because we're having these conversations with all the cities. Woodinville's already approved it. Again, we already talked that they're a contract agency, but there's a pass-through already in place. Carnation has approved that, which is part of Fire District 10. So we got a pass-through associated with that. North Bend has already approved this. Issaquah and Sammamish are the last two. So the way we're looking at it is everybody, by leveraging the relationship, the partnership, everybody contributes a little bit to be able to pay and fully fund that FTE to bring in that fourth assistant fire marshal to add that capacity that we are needing within the fire marshal's office. So everybody pays a little piece.
My question is more, when is that happening? And is that a like destined thing by us and Sammamish passing that? Or I guess that relies on the East Side Fire and Rescue Board to make that type of decision, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, once we are able to demonstrate that the revenue is coming in from everybody, obviously here we are in October and we're just having an opportunity to meet with Issaquah. We still need to get it through Sammamish. So if I'm answering it, what you're looking for, we're not in a position today to be able to hire that person. We have to demonstrate we got the revenue in to go back to the board and say, do we have authority to hire now?
Okay.
Can I jump in on
Yep.
that one? I imagine there would be surplus from cities that are paying or that are doing the pass-through funds for this too. Is there a plan yet? This is with my Issaquah hat on, by the way. Is there a plan yet for the fund balance for kind of remaining whatever's left over from fire permit fees that are passed over to East Side Fire and Rescue? Or is that a conversation to come?
Yeah, it's a conversation yet to come. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I guess it would be good if you could speak to this. I guess what I would be interested in is, would any of these monies be envisioned for use outside of fire marshal office resources or other things? Or is that kind of a broader conversation that we need to have?
Good evening, Ben Lane, Fire Chief. I wanted to find a way to get up here because I'm not going to have many opportunities to do that. So to answer the question around the fee collection, we would treat that as the revenue side into our budget process. And so when you look at revenue coming in, it reduces the cost for all of the partners involved. The goal here is to earmark the cost recovery that's being proposed in front of you today, specific to the fire marshal's office. We find ourselves in an excess. It might put Eastside Fire and Rescue leadership coming back to the board to discuss with the partners where they would like that revenue applied.
And toward all of these ideas, if we choose to do this and pass these fees through to Eastside Fire and Rescue, does that lower our annual contract expense? Is it additive? How does it relate to the fees that we are already paying to Eastside Fire and Rescue?
It would not lower the contract expense. These fees specifically arrived from a very, very tough budget process. And we had at the time only 2 proposals to add FTEs. One was an additional assistant fire marshal, and the other was a public educator, which also plays a very important prevention role within our service area, which I would also consider that underneath our fire marshal umbrella. So excess revenues could be applied to trying to bring that position underneath Eastside Fire and Rescue structure in the future.
I think I have one more. What is the plan, if we adopt this, to keep these fire permit fees aligned with your cost in the future? I know you talked about how you've got the Excel sheet and you understand all of that, but obviously it would require coming back to us. So is there a sense of plan to do that annually, or how do you envision that?
Yeah, great question. It would be annually. Right now, you look at your fire permit fees, actually probably a majority of your fees annually, usually around the October, November time. So what we would propose is we collect these analytics, again, almost real-time data, and then we would modify as needed the different fee structures or different permit types and bring that to you for adoption, leave it alone, decrease, any of those options would be available when we do the data. So instead of a simple COLA increase, we could say, here's the reason these permit fees are changing based on the analytics that we have.
All right. Any other questions from committee? All right. And I know some questions were asked and answered over email as well, so thank you for that. All right, then we'll move out of Q&A, and I'll just ask the clerk if there's anyone from the public with us.
Not at this time, Chair.
Any of you interested in providing public comment? Nice. Okay, if not, we're going to move then into, I'll just remind members of the community that are watching that we have one more opportunity for public comment after the next item, and of course you can email us with your thoughts at any time at citycouncil@issaquah.gov. So now we'll move into direction needed, which I think the two questions are, does the committee recommend increasing the fire permit fees as shown in Exhibit A, and do we recommend passing the proposed fire permit fees as passed through to Eastside Fire and Rescue? So who'd like to kick us off with comments? Council President, go for it.
I'll just dominate this meeting, that's fine. You know, as I look back to how we have approached some of our building fees and our impact fees and everything, one of the things that we have started to do with some of our partner organizations, such as the school district, is trying to standardize across different jurisdictions that they might serve. And so being responsive to what their needs are to cover their costs, to make sure that there are standards across different organizations. So I see that in here. We've also, when we've looked at our own permit fees, we've given our organization the goal of having at least, I believe, an 85 to 90% cost recovery. And so I see in here the idea of trying to approach and make sure that there is cost recovery on this, and that not just the cities that are having the growth are paying for it, but the actual building developer, homeowner permit is the one that's paying those fees. So I appreciate the alignment there with the costs to the particular person who is receiving the service, and the idea of making sure that there is cost recovery. I also appreciate that we have looked at our own costs and ensured that, you know, if we are the coordinating agency that somebody is doing a building permit through, ensuring that we are not going into the hole while doing this type of organization of the permit coordination. I appreciate that. So I think this is going in the right direction. I think as a city, we are going to need to determine, hey, if we're seeing a loss of revenue here, how do we approach that? And how do we approach that for our budget period? Because that is a real situation and something that we need to take into account. But I think these fees being directly aligned with Eastside Fire and Rescue so that there can be the appropriate number of fire marshals to make sure that the permits are happening quickly, and anybody who is going through one of these situations has the ability to get something happening swiftly and streamlined. So I see a lot of alignment here, and I appreciate that this has been brought to us. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Chang.
Yeah, I want to echo Council President Walsh's comments. You know, generally, I think it's always good to be standardized and similar with other cities within our jurisdiction. So it was good to see that, you know, all the cities other than Issaquah and Sammamish are already on the proposed fee schedule. And so I think, you know, we should definitely be aligned with that. I also think it's great that, you know, there's actually a lot of justification in terms of, you know, the amount of time that it takes. And, you know, we want to make sure that we're covering the costs and that applicants are covering the cost of having their systems inspected. So that's great. And also, I'm definitely very interested to see kind of what data you come back with next year in terms of, what's the actual amount of time spent on these inspections. It was good to hear that, as some of these technologies improve and you get more familiarity with them, potentially over time the time spent could be less. So I think that would be really great, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing back from you next year.
Same here. I don't think it's a surprise that I'm going to support this as well and recommend passage up to the city council. Agree that it's good to have uniformity and consistency. It's good to reflect true cost. Good to be mindful of sustainable growth going into the future. I think that's also important to acknowledge this is a fairly large increase too. So, just as the city tracking whether this becomes a barrier to development and also a hardship for residents, and then also our own impact on our own revenue needs as well. But again, I think we've done our due diligence and this is a good step forward. You've talked about using the analytics to do like that annual review of fees and stuff like that. I wonder if you would be open to providing some sort of report to the cities on that every year when the fees are updated, just for transparency with the partners as well. And I imagine that was something that would happen anyways, but I thought I'd throw that out there. And thanks for all I know for sure how hard and diligently you all have been working on this, especially with the other cities. I appreciate you very much. So I think you're hearing, yes, we recommend increasing, and yes, we recommend passing it over to EF&R. And when does this come back to the council? Any other comments real quick before we kind of start to talk about next steps? Yeah, Councilmember Jay.
Yeah, I agree with the point that you mentioned about, this is a big increase. And I think part of it is that, we were essentially undercharging for a long time. And so that is something that's important to acknowledge, from the perspective of, folks that have to get the fire inspections. It appears like it's a big increase, but ultimately it's like, if we have to, fund our fire services, if we're not funding these inspections from, folks that require them, then we're funding it out of, everyone else's, like the general fund. So I do think this ultimately is more fair, especially because there is a justification of, it is the amount of time that the staff, hardworking staff at Eastside Fire and Rescue have to spend on this. So I think it makes sense, even though, it is kind of a sticker shock to go from, whatever $700 or $200 for the fee originally to like $800. It's like 4x. So, yeah.
Well said, thanks. Yeah, okay, so November 10th is when we go to the council. Is it the administration's position to have it on regular business, or do we have to? I'm not sure.
We'd love to hear from the committee on that tonight.
Okay. Does the administration have any position on that before we talk about it? Maybe let's just go to committee first. You have your hand on the mic. Do you have a thought, Council President?
I was just looking at where we're at. We do have the 2026 school impact fees coming back that day, and I believe they are sitting on regular business. So I think this would be appropriate then for regular business as alignment.
I'm fine with that too. You good?
Yep.
All right, then let's place it on regular business. All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. And thank you for being with us in person this evening as well. With that, we'll do the next item on our agenda. And I see Thomas is with us here in the back, so we'll give you just a minute to come and get set up. It is COM 0177, the 2025 Comprehensive Plan Amendments and Rezone, presented by Thomas Valdries, our Senior Transportation Planner. Do you want us to take a break for a quick minute, or you get set up? Okay, great. I think we'll be okay.
Well, good evening, and thanks for having me today. I'm Thomas Valdries, Senior Transportation Planner. Today I'll be presenting on the 2025 Comp Plan amendments. The purpose is to seek this committee's input and recommendation to Council. So I do have two questions tonight. First, are the proposed changes clear and reasonable, or are there additional changes needed? And second, does the committee recommend proceeding with the proposed amendments at the November 10th council meeting? So just some background for anybody watching this online. Every year, staff compiles comp plan amendment requests. These come internally from staff, from council, as well as the public. We develop a docket or list of proposed amendments for the comp plan that council then agrees to consider for the year. This is considered a to-do list, which kind of helps the city manage our workload, prioritize policy issues, and ensure that we're compliant with state law. So being on the docket doesn't necessarily mean that it's guaranteed for final adoption, but we're just saying we're going to analyze it, take a look at it, do some public review, and see if it makes sense. Typically in January, we hold the public meeting, and then council makes a decision on what goes on the docket in March. So for this year, the docket included 5 items. Exhibit A contains the 5 items. The call was made to defer 2 of the items. We had some staffing constraints as well as complexities. For making 2 of the amendments were going to be challenging to do this year, so those have been temporarily deferred. So today, the discussion is really just around those 3 items in the red box. So this is to add a policy allowing for co-living, to change the land use designation of the food bank property, as well as to update the transportation element. So I'm just going to run through all the proposed amendments, and then I'll take a pause at the end. So Amendment 1 is to add H policy B6. This is to create a new policy that allows for market rate, non-subsidized co-living housing in all zones which allow for multifamily housing. This amendment allows the city to stay compliant with House Bill 1998, which requires cities to allow co-living housing in all zones that allow for at least 6 units, including mixed-use zones. The second amendment is for the Issaquah food bank property. So this property was recently sold by the city to the food bank, and its current zoning is for community facilities, which is intended for publicly owned properties. So given that there was a recent selling of this property, we need to therefore update the zoning to match. So this next slide here shows what is proposed. So the property would just match the existing land use conditions, which is all retail. Moving on through here, third amendment is related to the transportation element. So these are a set of amendments that I will briefly go through. These are to ensure consistency between the mobility action plan and the transportation element, and they ensure compliance with House Bill 1181, which requires us to develop multimodal concurrency standards. So just for context for folks, multimodal concurrency standards are to ensure that we have transportation performance metrics for all modes. So this is for walking, biking, transit, and driving. This ensures that when we do have growth, that it is aligned with our needs to ensure that we are not overloading our transportation system. So this first policy is D1. This amendment is to expand the sidewalk tiers from beyond just the Central Issaquah Regional Growth Center to all of Central Issaquah. And this is just to understand that that the network is more than just the Regional Growth Center itself, and having connections to that Regional Growth Center is also very important. This amends sidewalk tiers and allows for the possibility of more sidewalks. Next one is policy D3. So this second amendment is to allow the leading pedestrian interval. Many folks may not know what this is, but it's basically adding 3 seconds of additional walk time in advance of vehicles in select intersections. So the intersections we are talking about are for Tier 1, which is Central Issaquah, Highlands, and Old Town. These are areas that we see higher densities of pedestrians, where there's higher density of jobs and housing. So leading pedestrian interval will help make sure the pedestrians get a little head start, that they're more visible in the intersections, and it'll actually allow for a lot of better functionality for some parts of the intersection, And we also acknowledge that if there are any challenges that this would add for cars, that we would take a look at that and make sure we're not overloading. So studies have shown that this is a really great and very cost-effective way to enhance safety. So staff is very excited about this. Implementation isn't expected to degrade intersections too bad. And it wouldn't degrade anything below our adopted service levels. So something that is in line with our policies and seems like a great opportunity to do. This next one is for Goal E. So this is just making some minor updates to the bicycle goal area. This provides additional context and definitions for our existing bike facilities. This next one is related to transit level of service. So previously, last year, we had a level of service standard that was based on the bus stop's amenities, which are things that we acknowledge that we have pretty good control over relative to other things. So this new standard is a more comprehensive tiers-based approach. So this expands on our community's desire to have more than just bus stop amenities, but also to have better transit service and access to transit. So we took a look and we specifically designed these standards to align with King County Metro standards. This can help us advocate for better service in the future. Using their exact standards, we can therefore say, hey, look, this meets your standards. Why not do stuff for us? So it's a little bit more difficult than that, but that's essentially the idea. We're really trying to beef up our ability to advocate. So this Goal F section talks about ways that we would advocate for enhanced service, ways that we work together for improving planning and operations. As an aside, this morning, John Mortensen and I, we took a ride along with King County Metro staff. We have a new 203 bus that we're trying to work a little bit. So just imagine, I think there were like 8 to 10 folks in like safety vests on a private bus, 40-foot bus, just cruising around Costco campus area. So just keep that in your mind's eye when we were thinking about, that's one of the ways that we try to improve operations. We actually work with them and we try to make these incremental changes. And that specific picture isn't codified in this document, but that's just sort of like the flavor of like things that we do to, every time there's a service change, we try to improve it. This next section is Goal F. And lastly, yeah, it just basically talks about additional updates to transit level of service. We added a table and just more policy language. So to get here, we did work with TAB. We brought specifically the transportation element parts over 4 meetings. So in April, May, July, and August, TAB had a lot of touch points. We really vetted a lot of these topics. The Planning Policy Commission then reviewed TAB's transportation element updates and the remainder of the other updates we talked about related to land use. They saw those in 2 meetings in September, and after reviewing, they then unanimously recommended approval. The Mobility and Infrastructure Committee also...
Real quick, so just to clarify, this did go to TAB. TAB did review, or the transportation element part of it.
Right, so to clarify, part of it went to TAB, just the transportation element part. And then the PPC saw both.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. And to add to that confusion, hopefully I'll try to clarify it in real time. Mobility and Infrastructure Committee saw what TAB saw. So they did not see the land use, the 2 land use items that you are seeing tonight. Yep. Mobility and Infrastructure Committee did unanimously approve to place on consent specifically the transportation element section. So in terms of impacts, there's no financial direct impacts. This change should help us comply with state law. It'll enhance clarity throughout the mobility action plan and the transportation element for that portion. It'll also strengthen multimodal transportation planning outcomes. And lastly, in terms of like the land use component, Issaquah Food Bank has been a vital contributor to this community. So, you know, the selling of that property and the land use change for that is really going to help that organization. So timings and next steps, we are in October, and in November, hoping to take this to council for adoption. So I'll pause here, and these are the 2 questions that staff has. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Questions from committee? Council President.
Yeah, really appreciate the leading pedestrian interval, but that brings up questions for me about why that and not other things. So can you talk a little bit about how you decided what were the things that we needed to include in this transportation element?
Yeah, a lot of the concerns that the community has given is around safety and pedestrian access, specifically not only to transit, but also just like making it easier to walk around, but also not impacting traffic, which can be challenging in those particular neighborhoods in general. So we wanted to see if we could do both, so not degrade intersections from like a car perspective, but also just make it easier to get around without a car. So leading pedestrian interval can do both. It's really great. It's used in a lot of major cities, and people love it. So it's a great way. I think that, you know, there's a crash reduction factor, which is saying like, you know, how much you know, value we can get from something like this. It's something like 15%. So it's really great, and I think the community has really been excited about this.
Another one that I'm personally very excited for, and I think the community would be if it was a little bit more well-known, but is the idea of continuous sidewalks for biking and walking, instead of having bikers and walkers come down to road level through curb cuts at driveways or certain intersections. Have we considered that as an opportunity to improve safety and make the more vulnerable road user more visible and require the cars to slow down?
Yeah, these are all great ideas, and definitely included in this plan. We have a bike tiers system that really speaks to that. So we want to encourage not only having, but also building a bike infrastructure where it makes sense. So part of this update was to sort of look at the topography of the community. We have lots of hills and valleys. So, you know, obviously it's much less effort to bike on a flat versus a hill. So we take that into consideration, and this exercise really just helped us prioritize where a lot of these projects can be built. And a lot of that has to do with just like feeling comfortable and all that. So those are all really important factors that we included in this update.
Councilmember Zhang, go ahead.
So on the pedestrian thing, one complaint that I've heard from some folks is, and I think maybe this just goes to the definition of level of service for pedestrians. It's basically, you know, is it safe to walk? Not how, and whereas the definition of level of service for cars is how long do you have to wait? And it could be safe to walk, but there's a lot of crosswalks in Issaquah where you have to wait for a very, very long time. So I'm curious if that's something that we might, you know, the level of, in terms of level of service, incorporating that wait time thing. Because I know, you know, in the Highlands, there's some intersections where just the lights don't even respond to you pressing them, and even if there's no cars, you have to wait for like 5 minutes. And that's, I feel like that's something that we should be addressing, and, you know, wouldn't necessarily be in this amendment, or, but I'm curious, you know, is that something that we'd consider for future comp plan amendments?
Yeah, we definitely want to make walking a, you know, great option. So yeah, I know that our traffic engineering staff looks at intersections to sort of make those value judgments. But we can certainly look into that. If there's specific areas that you're finding that you're waiting and it's kind of like a ridiculous amount of time, I think we'd love to like kind of know more about that, and we can try to tweak that.
Front and Sunset.
That's a classic example. Yeah.
Yeah, Front and Sunset, and also I think, I mean, I had a friend who lived in Discovery West who complained about, you know, the sidewalks to cross Highlands Drive to be able to go to Safeway. And he basically said it was so bad that he would just drive to Safeway even though it was like half a mile. And that's not what our residents should necessarily be doing, so.
Any other questions from the committee? I don't know if I've ever thought to ask this, but the land use change for the food bank site doesn't change any of the like redevelopment limitations based on the historic preservation nature of that particular building, right?
I don't believe so, no.
Good question. Kristen would know. So I'm going to guess, I think it has the designation from the historic register, so that designation still remains. But as we work with Food Bank on terms of what the redevelopment will look like, it may come up in terms of how that designation, what are the limitations and what can and cannot be done.
Okay. Might not necessarily be that we need to have all that information when this goes to full council, but might be nice to have a little bit more clarity on kind of what are those potential tension points there for the rest of the council. All right, any other questions? Not seeing any. No members of the public with us in the room. Clerk, anyone online with us?
No, Chair, not at this time.
All right. Well, as always, to those of you that are watching live on YouTube or during your commute watching this Issaquah committee, you can email us anytime at citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov with any thoughts or questions you might have. So we will now move into deliberation of the committee. The questions are they clear and reasonable, additional changes needed, and are we ready to recommend proceeding to moving the amendments to the November 10th council meeting? So who'd like to get us started? Sure, Council President.
I just realized I have one more question. For the 2 items that were delayed due to staffing and things like that, are those things that we envision have coming on the comp plan docket for this year? Or are we still facing some of those challenges?
Yeah, as we started digging into them, they were not that straightforward. So in addition to the staffing challenge, they're just more complicated matters. Primarily the ownership, because they're not just all city-owned properties that have the CFF zoning. It's also the school district. It's also the Sam Platt Water and Sewer District. So it became more complicated. And the number of lots that have this designation also is significant. So it isn't a small task, but there's a lot of history to each one of these things too. So we haven't put it on the docket at this point. I think these are some of the things that we do as the periodic update, because these are not one-off things. You're looking at comprehensively the whole thing. Same thing with changing the residential zones, because there was other things at play right now. So it was just a name change, it was just a text change, but it may have, as we implement middle housing, we may learn a few things. So I think they're not on the docket for 2025 because we're getting, or 2026, I mean, we're getting staff geared up for other things, and this one will probably be tagged along with more of a comprehensive. If construction's slow, we have a lot of construction permits at this point, and so that's sort of a priority to meet those timelines and get those processed. But we're open to, if council wants us to continue to put this on, we can certainly keep it on.
Can you talk a little bit about why this came up in the first place and what the pros and cons of, especially, I know the community facilities came up because of the food and clothing bank and all of that.
Yeah, that was the only reason. I think the Kristen was thinking that, instead of having to do these rezones to whenever the city's trying to surplus, because it happened with the City Hall Northwest, now with the food bank, is there a way to just not have to do the rezone? But it's not, I think the city's surplusing, that's probably in the short term, we're not looking at any more sales unless, it comes out of the public, the facilities planning. So this is already done, so the problem we were trying to solve was not having to do rezones. But every time the city wanted to sell a property, we had to do a rezone request. That's the real issue we were trying to solve.
And how about the single-family zoning naming?
That was just kind of a leftover thing from middle housing piece, that it's not really intuitive to call it single-family estates
Yeah.
and single-family small lot. But it doesn't change any of the development standards or anything. It was more of a naming thing. I think that was on it. I'm not sure why that could be done.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking, is that seems to be the easier idea for something to put on
Yeah.
a 2026 docket. And then what's the process and timeline for docket items for 2026?
I don't believe we have received any requests from the public. So there's really nothing on the docket at this point other than whatever the city chooses to put or council wants us to put on the docket. But I believe the deadline is September 15th for anyone to submit a request for any of the changes, and we did not receive any.
And how about for internal? When is kind of that timeline?
I think we take the docket to Planning and Policy Commission, bring it to council. I have to look at the exact dates.
Yeah. Okay, so that's still something that we could, weigh in on a little bit as we're kind of looking through. And I imagine as we're looking at the budget, just trying to understand what our staffing and resources are to take on things like this. So.
Yeah, I mean, it won't have any, it won't make any difference in terms of what the community will experience or feel about it. It's more of a internal thing than
Yeah.
an external thing.
Okay, thanks.
Did you have a follow-up question, or do you want to get started on comments? Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think these all, generally seem to be pretty simple. I don't really understand why, what the complexities were around, renaming the single-family zones, because what I've seen other cities do is basically just rename it to neighborhood residential. So I hope that we can, get that on in 2026. I mean, it's literally just, renaming, so I don't think it should be too complicated. But, generally, I think, especially on the transportation policy changes, I think those are all great, especially the leading pedestrian intervals. So, excited to see us acknowledging those in our comprehensive plan. And I'm also looking forward to see how we actually implement them in our implementation. That's it for me.
Plus one to everything that she said. Those were all of the items that came up. I appreciate the process that we've gone through with the Food and Clothing Bank and understanding what their needs are as this comes through a docket, and what our needs are to surplus the property and kind of go through that requirement. I like the changes that we're proposing for the transportation element. I appreciate that you mentioned that it had gone through the Transportation Advisory Board, because that was one of my questions, was, hey, why didn't they look at that? So yeah, I see no problems with this. Thank you.
Yeah, double thumbs up here as well. I think, when we were first approving the docket back in March, we had kind of a preliminary conversation that some of these items might be, we might find them challenging as we go through it, and so kind of that's what we found here. So, and we've got to be responsive of your whole department, right? You've got to kind of flex depending on the entire workload of things coming in. So I totally get that. So what Council President brings up is really important. We've got to consider this during budget, right? So I hope we can have that conversation, and then otherwise everything seems in order here. So I appreciate that. Oh, except for it would be nice when this comes to council to have a little bit more details about the historic registry stuff. All right, how do you have what you need?
One last thing, I do have a recommended motion for you to consider.
All right, I move to approve the 2025 comprehensive plan amendments as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any other committee? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any in opposition, or any abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, then we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is announcements. Any announcements from committee? Oh,
Is that on consent or regular business?
oh. Consent.
I think so.
Let's do consent on that one. Yeah, sorry, thank you. So we'll move on to announcements then. Any announcements from committee? We do not have a meeting scheduled for November, if I'm right, and we do have one scheduled for December 2nd, but nothing's on the agenda for that meeting yet, so stay tuned on that. And there being no further business for the committee, we are adjourned at 7:50 p.m.